we introduce Angela Kimball with the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
Chairwoman DeLauro and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, I want to express our gratitude for this subcommittee's strong bipartisan support of mental health and the investments you've made, including for research at the National Institutes of Health and the National Institute of Mental Health. And I'd like to specifically express NAMI's appreciation for this subcommittee's hearing last week on building a mental health crisis response system, NAMI's top priority and the focus of my testimony. Today, the default response to many people in crisis is a law enforcement response, which often ends in trauma or tragedy. But as you stated at the hearing, Madam Chairwoman, there is something we can do about it. Thank you for your leadership. Last year, Congress took an important step in transforming crisis care by passing the bipartisan National Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which created 988 as a 3-digit crisis line. 988 provides a unique opportunity to develop crisis response systems with 3 core elements. First, crisis call centers to answer 988 calls. Second, mobile crisis teams that can provide an in-person response. And third, crisis receiving and stabilization programs for those in crisis who need more follow-up. While there's a clear vision for successful 988 crisis response, few systems meet these standards. As a result, whether through the annual appropriations process, broader efforts to upgrade our country's infrastructure, or other means, Congress must make significant investments over the next 10 years in 988 crisis infrastructure. For fiscal year 2022, NAMI urges this subcommittee to include $240 million to substantially expand capacity for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which will answer 988 calls. And we're gratified that this subcommittee included $35 million in the Mental Health Block Grant to fund a 5% set aside for crisis services last year. To build on this valuable start, we're requesting an increase to 10% for fiscal year 2022 to develop services such as mobile crisis teams. NAMI is also requesting $12.5 million for the SAMHSA Strengthening Community Crisis Response Systems program to help communities develop intensive services like crisis stabilization. Without the appropriate infrastructure in place, a person in crisis often gets a police response, not a mental health response. And that's exactly what happened to Walter Wallace Jr. Walter had a mental health crisis in October 2020, and his family called 911. And instead of getting the help that he needed, he was shot and killed. And he's not alone. 1 in 4 fatal police shootings are of people with mental illness, with 1 in 3 being people of color. So what does an appropriate crisis response look like? I can tell you because I not only represent NAMI, I'm also the parent of a child who's been in crisis. A few years ago, my son experienced a psychotic episode where he was delusional and threatening, believing I had conspired with the FBI to bug his home. I was able to text a code word to a friend who called a mental health crisis line. When there was a knock on the door, my son told me not to answer it. And when I could see his mind slip to another place for just an instant, I ran for the door. A mobile crisis team had arrived. The team was kind and non-threatening. They talked with me and my son, saw the conditions in the house, and after putting the pieces together, the team lead said, "I'm hearing, Alex, that you haven't slept for days and things are getting kind of intense. Do I have that right?" He said, "Yeah, my head hurts and I just want to sleep, but I can't." And she said, "I know a doctor at the hospital who'll definitely be able to help you get to sleep and to stop your head from hurting if you're willing to go with me. Does that sound okay?" And remarkably, he said, "Yeah, I'll go." The next step in his journey was the crisis stabilization unit, which after 23 hours moved him to a psychiatric inpatient unit because he was still delusional. While I can't say the rest of his journey went well, the crisis response did. We were lucky, but it shouldn't take luck. Appropriate crisis response should be available to everyone, no matter where they live. And with 988, we have an historic opportunity to change how our country responds to people in crisis. I hope the subcommittee will champion this critical change and NAMI stands ready to serve as a resource to you. Thank you for your leadership.
I want to say a thank you to you, Angela, and thanks to NAMI for all the great work that you do. This is very, very appropriate topic. We had a hearing devoted to this issue on, it was about mental health, and it was about law enforcement, and specifically about the 988 number, and it going into effect next July. But it was also brought to our attention that we can introduce this crisis line, if you will. But if we don't provide the infrastructure to make it workable, that we will not succeed at doing it. So we have heard from you, and thank you. Thank you. I should have started by saying this. Thank you for your courage in telling your own personal story. And it's our hope that your boy is doing well. But it's not easy to tell your own story, but it has a powerful effect on all of us. So we are very attuned and aware of this issue about the 988 crisis line, and want to be able to provide the resources that are necessary to make it successful so that people get that mobile team and the kind of crisis intervention that they need, and not be incarcerated or not, have to undergo a law enforcement protocol rather than a medical protocol. So thank you very, very much for your testimony this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairwoman.